The DeMar DeRozan era is officially over in Chicago, as DeMar DeRozan has signed a 3-year deal in a sign-and trade to go to the Sacramento Kings. The Chicago Bulls get back 2 second-round picks and Chris Duarte, and the San Antonio Spurs are going to be acquiring Harrison Barnes in this 3-team deal. Before we get into it all, make sure you hit that like button and let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on DeMar DeRozan heading to Sacramento and your thoughts on the Bulls' return and what they got in the deal with 2 second-round picks and Chris Duarte. I have a lot to talk about in this video. I have a lot of thoughts on this trade, and then at the end I want to talk about kind of DeRozan, his time in Chicago, and kind of just him as a person in general. So a lot to kind of get to in this video. Let's start off with the trade. I overall think that the Bulls did a good job with this deal. Okay, now I need people to understand that 1, DeRozan is an unrestricted free agent. 2, the Bulls were willing to let DeMar DeRozan just go for nothing because the Bulls need cap space desperately. And number 3, and most importantly, the Bulls are heading towards a rebuild. Okay, now the front office is never going to straight up say it, but they officially have made the big move to signal that they are heading towards a rebuild in trading DeMar DeRozan, as he was very clearly the best player the past couple of seasons, and he was keeping them afloat in terms of keeping them around 500 as a team. Without him, they're not going to be a 500 team, and we expect that Levine and Vucevic and maybe even Lonzo Ball will also be moved off this roster. And these 2 moves of trading Alex Caruso and DeMar DeRozan have signaled that the rebuild has officially started. I want to make that clear because I see a lot of Bulls fans and some other people in general just saying the Bulls got fleeced. Well, first off, DeRozan and the Bulls, okay, they were not going to work together on re-signing, okay? They make no sense to re-sign DeRozan in a rebuild. He's 34 years old and going to be 35 next season. Why would the Bulls re-sign DeRozan? That makes no sense. So if you're trying to tell me that the Bulls should have kept DeRozan, I don't really understand what you're trying to tell me. Also, the Bulls DeRozan is an unrestricted free agent, and the Bulls were willing to let him go for basically nothing. They were not expecting anything in return. Why? Because cap space is most important in a rebuild. They do not need anything in return for DeMar DeRozan. The most important thing that they need to do is just get his money off the books and don't take back any contracts or long-term salary contracts. If you're wondering why that's more important than really getting anything in return for DeMar DeRozan, the reason why is because cap space is most important in a rebuild because you can use cap space to get assets, okay? If the Bulls took back any sort of contracts in this deal, specifically long-term contracts, they would not be able to use cap space to take on more money to then acquire assets. Rebuilding teams take on bad contracts and get picks or other assets to take on those bad contracts. That's why in a rebuilding scenario, it is very important for the Bulls to have cap space. That's why they prioritize cap space over trying to get anything significant in return for DeMar DeRozan, which is why they were willing to let him go for nothing, okay? I want to make this very clear because I'm seeing too many people say the Bulls got fleeced for a guy that has played really well for them the last couple seasons. I'm aware that DeMar DeRozan had a very good career in Chicago. He played extremely well here in Chicago. But I'm also aware that he's 34 years old and he doesn't fit the modern day style of basketball. I'm not shocked that he didn't have that much of a market for him, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So for the Bulls in general, I think that the Bulls did a good job with this. It's important to note that the Bulls did actually have the leverage in this scenario. Yes, I'm aware DeMar DeRozan is a free agent, and yes, I'm aware that he can kind of decide where he wants to go. But if he truly wanted to go to the Sacramento Kings, the Kings didn't have the cap space to re-sign him outright or sign him outright. And DeRozan was not taking the mid-level exception to just go to Sacramento. He wasn't going to just take that low amount of money. So the Kings had to work with the Bulls to get DeMar DeRozan. It was the only way that DeMar DeRozan was going to go to the Kings. And the Bulls had the leverage in this scenario, and I think the Bulls did a pretty decent job using this leverage to get 2 second-round picks and Chris Duarte out of this 3-team deal. Okay, I don't know why some people are expecting the Bulls to get a couple first-round picks or young players or etc. That wasn't gonna happen. The Bulls are not gonna get multiple first-round picks for a 34-year-old aging veteran that had good years in Chicago, but he doesn't fit the modern-day style. That was never gonna happen. The Bulls instead got 2 second-round picks, which they desperately need, and took a flyer in Chris Duarte. So overall, I think the Bulls did a good job with this deal in general, and I think Bulls fans should be happy because their expectation was that they weren't going to get anything for DeRozan in the first place, which we were completely fine with, but instead we got 2 seconds and Chris Duarte out of it, which is a win. It's just kind of icing on the cake at this point, because yet again, cap space is very important right now. Not really necessarily trying to get more salary to take back just because you're trading someone away. To clear up the rest of the details for this deal, DeRozan is signing a 3-year deal with the Kings. It's either worth $74 million or $76 million, conflicting reports by Woj and Shams. I'm sure it's just a difference in incentives and stuff, so we'll figure out what it is later, but it's not that big of a deal. So 3 years, at least $74 million, maybe $76 million for DeRozan, and then Chris Haynes reported that it's $59 million guaranteed. So we'll see how the rest of the deal kind of works out for DeRozan and the Kings. Now, if you're wondering why I'm actually pretty happy about this for the Bulls, the reason why is because let's look at the Bulls draft asset pool currently. In any sort of rebuilding scenario, you just need picks. I don't care if it's first or second round. I don't care where the picks land, okay? You need picks. And right now, the Bulls do not have any other second round picks until 2029. We'll see if the Bulls get this 2028 pick, but this pick is wrapped up in both the San Antonio trade with DeMar DeRozan and the Portland trade. So the Bulls might not get this 2028 pick. So we at least know that we're getting the 2029 pick, but that's the earliest that we're guaranteed. So getting picks back in the second round is extremely important for the Bulls, especially if you're heading towards a rebuild. Getting as much young talent as possible is a good thing in a rebuild. I don't care where the pick is at. I don't care if it's first or second round. Obviously, you need, that high lottery pick to draft your franchise cornerstone. But in general, you just need to draft young talent. And having more picks is good for drafting young talent. It's very simple. Now, for the Kings and what they probably sent over to the Bulls, I'm not entirely sure what picks is going to be. I would love this Portland second round pick. I don't know if the Bulls are going to be able to get it. It's probably going to... The Bulls probably got this pick, the Sacramento Kings second round pick in 2025 and not the Portland pick. But we'll see. I would love to get that Portland pick, but we do not know the exact picks that were sent over to Chicago in this deal. But that's totally fine. Again, I'm just happy that the Bulls even have more second round picks to use and hopefully use in the draft. It's also important to note that the Bulls created a pretty large trade exception in this deal because they only took back basically $6 million from this trade, in Chris Duarte. Chris Duarte's making about $6 million, and DeRozan's obviously going to make much more than that. They create a large trade exception. I don't think the Bulls are going to be using this anytime soon, and I will not be shocked to see if this ends up just being, a wasted trade exception like we saw with the Daniel Tice trade exception. However, I think there's a legitimate reason for the Bulls to actually use this trade exception now. And if they're able to just move one of the Vooch contract, Lonzo contract, or Levine contract, this trade exception actually becomes pretty valuable to the Bulls. Why? Because they can take on a bad contract into that trade exception and get a draft pick or an asset out of taking on that bad contract. So if a player is making $17.6 million or less on a pretty, lengthy bad deal or something, the Bulls can go ahead and take on that money using the trade exception and hopefully get a draft pick or so out of it if they decide to do so. But we'll see if the Bulls are able to use this trade exception to good use. We know with AK, it's probably not going to happen, but we'll see. Bulls got Chris Duarte back in this deal, and Chris Duarte is just sort of like a flyer type player. It's worth noting that Chris Duarte is already 27. I think some people don't recognize that. He came into the NBA as a rookie at 24 years old. His rookie season was pretty good with the Pacers. I mean, he averaged 13 points per game on really good shooting. And then obviously these past couple seasons haven't gone too well for Duarte. But for the Bulls, it's a good idea just to take a flyer, kind of see what he could turn into. And for Duarte, it's just taking a flyer and see if he can maybe be a wing player for us next season. And the Bulls need wings, which is good for Duarte, which means that he'll be playing probably next season. It'll be somewhere in the rotation. In terms of how this works out for the Bulls and their salary situation. So because we got notice that the Patrick Williams contract is actually just $18 million flat for every single year, that makes it so the Bulls are even closer to the tax than we were projecting them to be already for this season. Overall, I think it's good for the Bulls for this deal for P. Will to be at flat $18 million, but we'll explain about that in a different time. But because of this, the Bulls are now about $10 million below the tax and not $13 million, which is what we projected before, because we thought P. Will's contract went up every single season, and so he'd be starting at about $15 million this season instead of 18. But because that's not the case, the Bulls only have about $10 million below the tax before this trade went down, and obviously then acquiring Chris Duarte the Bulls are taking out about $6 million in salary, so they'll have about basically $4 million below the luxury tax now after this trade is complete, which who knows when this trade is going to become official, but that's the projected salary situation for the Bulls now that this DeMar DeRozan sign and trade has gone down. And once again, I'm just going to say this. I think people need to understand the Bulls, we were willing to let DeMar DeRozan go for nothing. So you're basically expecting nothing. He's an unrestricted free agent. You got 2 second-round picks out of it, which you desperately need, and you were able to take a flyer on Chris Duarte. I think it's pretty good, and most importantly, you're signaling that the rebuild is actually starting. That's the most important thing out of this, and the Bulls did something that I never thought they'd actually do, which is admit to the rebuild, trading DeMar DeRozan away and not keeping him for the long term. I didn't think it was going to happen because it seemed like the Bulls front office was in love with him, but they did it, and I'm happy that they actually did it, which is a humongous W in my opinion, as the Bulls are hopefully heading into the right direction. For Duarte, he is on the last year of his rookie deal, so the Bulls are going to have to make a decision with him as he heads into restricted free agency in 2025. We'll see if the Bulls can sign him to a extension before the season starts, but I doubt it. I don't think there's any reason to sign him to an extension. So he will also be heading into restricted free agency most likely, as well as Josh Giddey, who the Bulls just acquired in an Alex Caruso deal. To end this video, I want to talk about DeMar DeRozan and his time in Chicago, and then just kind of him as a person. I thoroughly enjoyed DeRozan's time here in Chicago. His time in Chicago is always going to be remembered. He had some incredible years here. One of the most clutch players in the past 3 seasons in a Bulls uniform. And he was an absolute warrior. He rarely missed games. He, played the most minutes per game last season at age 34, which is crazy. And he did a lot for this team just to kind of stay together as a team and not look at like an awful team. So I just want to say to DeMar DeRozan, who will never see this, but just thank you for your time here in Chicago. You gave Bulls fans a lot to cheer for. And go win a ring to kind of cap off your Hall of Fame career. That's kind of the one missing thing for DeRozan, is to kind of get that ring, and he'll no doubt, in my opinion, be in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done if he continues playing, which he should be continuing playing. Now, here's the other part about this, though, which is, I think, important to talk about. I'm not shocked that DeRozan wasn't necessarily sought after in this free agency. I think a lot of Bulls fans kind of value DeRozan at a very high level, but you can kind of see around the league that he wasn't valued as highly. And the reason why is because he doesn't fit the modern day style. So I'm very interested to see what the Kings are going to look like with DeMar DeRozan in play. I'm aware that he kind of fits into like the offensive centric Kings team, but the Kings also play with a lot of pace, and DeRozan doesn't fit into that. So as you can see, DeRozan doesn't fit into the modern day style of pace, threes, space, etc. He doesn't really fit into it, and he doesn't really take a lot of shots in the paint either. He is a mid-range master, and which is kind of the reason why the past 2 seasons I've been saying that it was kind of time for the Bulls to move on from DeRozan, because he suddenly became the best player on this team. But I think it was kind of easy to tell that this Bulls team was not going to go anywhere if he was leading the team. With the Sacramento Kings, I expect him to be the 3rd best player for that team, behind De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. So that's kind of the role that I see DeRozan fitting in perfectly in for a championship level type team. But he was never going to be leading a team to a championship with his sort of game, not taking threes and not playing to the modern day style. So I think it is important that the Bulls did move on from him for many reasons, and obviously because the Bulls should be heading towards a rebuild, and having DeRozan on your team in a rebuild makes absolutely no sense. That does not take away anything. My criticism when it comes to DeRozan is that does not take anything away from him as a player. He is a fantastic player, and I have no doubt he's going to perform very well for the Kings. I just have questions about how the fit's going to work, but I'm sure that that'll all get figured out as well in Sacramento. Last thing I'll say about DeRozan, it seems like he was an awesome teammate. Obviously, I don't have any experiences to share, but it was kind of clear that he took Ayo under his wing, and took some of the other younger players under his wing, like Dalen Terry, and just seemed like an absolute professional in the locker room, and was willing to teach younger players how to kind of just be an NBA player. And that's not something that you can kind of always get in the NBA today. That's not something he's paid to do. He just decided to do that because he wanted to do that, and that's awesome as a teammate from him. So appreciate everything that DeRozan did in Chicago, but as I said at the start of this video, it was the right time to move on from DeMar DeRozan. And I'm happy the Bulls did it. I'm truly happy that the Bulls did it. I'm happy that they got stuff back for DeRozan, which I was completely content with not getting anything back for DeMar DeRozan. But the Bulls got something back in return for DeMar DeRozan, and I'm happy about it. We'll see what the Bulls are going to be doing from here on out. Obviously, the LaVine trade, which the Bulls are trying to trade LaVine, is very evident. We'll see if that actually does happen. And now the priority should be to get Vooch off this roster ASAP. And I think the Bulls should be able to do that, but we'll see. After that, then the Bulls have officially completed the start of the rebuild. And hopefully the Bulls can start moving their way towards keeping their pick next season and drafting their next franchise cornerstone in the 2025 NBA draft. But that's all I have for my thoughts on the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade to the Sacramento Kings. I like the deal. I'm happy for the Bulls, and I think I'm mostly just happy because it signals, hey, the Bulls are finally heading towards the rebuild, which is the correct decision. And I'm happy we got something back for an unrestricted free agent who could have gone pretty much anywhere. Make sure you guys like the video. Let me know down in the comment section down below your thoughts on the DeMar DeRozan deal, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.